I'm Daniela, and I'm here with Chris Elphick, an ecology professor at the University of Connecticut who has done some work in conservation biology, so I'll be asking him a few questions today. Tell me about what conservation biology means to you.
Well, conservation biology is really, in my mind, the study of extinction, why extinction has happened in the past, and how the way we're acting, events today are causing species to decline and head towards extinction. And so much of the focus is on things that humans are doing to hasten the rate of extinction among species, and things that we can do to slow the rate of extinction among species.
Okay, and how does this pertain to coastal birds?
Well, a lot of coastal species, there's a lot of species occur in coastal areas, and coastal areas are particularly affected by humans because that's where much of the world's human population lives, is along coasts. And there are a number of fairly specialized habitats that occur in coastal areas like beaches and salt marshes that don't cover a very large area, and they tend to be focused around big river mouths, and those tend to be the places which humans have settled and built big cities. And so a lot of habitats has been lost in coastal areas, and a lot of those habitats did not occur over very big areas anyway, originally before people came along. So the species that occur there have been very heavily impacted by humans.
And what type of bird species have you focused on in your studies?
Well, people in our research group have studied a number of different types of birds, ranging from piping plovers and least terns, which are shorebirds that nest on beaches, through to birds that nest in salt marshes. One of the species that we've spent a lot of time studying is a small, streaky brown bird called the Salt-Marsh Sparrow, which is found only in salt marshes, and which spends a lot of its time running around under the grass, and which has some fairly unusual biological traits, but is also has a pretty small population size, and there's a number of reasons to believe that they are declining and threatened with extinction.
And what are the things that are affecting these birds?
Well, the number of things. The thing that's probably affected them most in the past is simply habitat loss. They occur in the northeastern United States, which is where much of the U.S. population is, and where a lot of coastal habitat has been developed. So a lot of marsh habitat has disappeared. What remains of the marsh habitat has been changed in a wide range of ways, and continues to change. One of the biggest changes that has happened in the last few decades has been the spread of an introduced plant that is not native to the region. It's called Phragmites. It's a tall grass that grows 8+ feet tall, so it's taller than I am.
What are the results you've concluded through your studies?
Well, one of the big things that we've done is to look at the things that affect reproductive success in the birds, what affects the number of chicks that are produced and whether nests are successful or not. And one of the most important things, that the main cause of nest failure, is flooding, especially during high tides. And high tides, the height of the highest tides varies throughout the month. And when it's close to the full moon or the new moon, you get particularly high tides, and on those days, frequently the tide water is high enough that it floods the nest. Now, the birds have a number of adaptations that seem to enable them to survive that. For example, even fairly young chicks that are only as little as 5 days old, seem to be capable of getting out of the nest, climbing up through the vegetation, and kind of hanging out above the water until the tide drops back down, and then they go back into the nest, which happens, an hour or two later. But younger chicks can't do that. They basically just drown. Even the older chicks will drown if the tide water is high enough that it goes above the top of the vegetation, which happens on the highest tides. And if there are eggs in the nest, frequently they'll just float away in the water, and then they die. So nest flooding is a really big cause of nest failure, and right now it happens at a fairly high level, but not such a high level that it would cause the species to be unable to reproduce. But if sea level increases enough, then we anticipate that will happen, and that we'll get to the point where the birds simply can't breed anymore. And if that happens, then extinction will follow pretty quickly.
So what do you think humans can do on a daily basis or in general to help conserve?
Well, it's hard because many of the things that need to happen to conserve species need to be done at a very big scale. So the biggest threats that native species face are habitat loss, and probably in the future climate change is also going to be equally, if not more, important. So those are two big things, and individually it's very hard for people to do much about that other than through supporting public policy that prevents habitat destruction or that leads to reduced use of reduced carbon emissions, those types of things. So supporting those policies is a really important thing that people can do. But there's also lots of little things that you can do in your day-to-day life, because the reason that we have lost a lot of habitat and the reason why climate is changing is because collectively people do lots and lots of little things which add up. Cutting down a little bit of native habitat in your yard, if several million people do that, it causes a big effect. Equally, if everybody drives more than they really have to, or leaves their lights on, or doesn't turn off their computer monitor screen when they go out of the room, those types of little things add up, and that collectively, that reducing consumption, reducing the use of fossil fuels, and so on, are ultimately the problem. And it's really only going to be if a lot of people decide that they're going to change their lives to reduce consumption and reduce use of fossil fuels that we're going to see changes in these things. So that's probably the most important thing you can do, is just think about how you're using resources and do less of it.
All right, well, thank you for speaking with us about conservation.
You're welcome.